The cry of an empty cabin. The wind cut sharp across the open prairie, rattling the loose shingles on the roof of the small log cabin. Inside, John Carter sat hunched near the dying fire, his broad shoulders sagging in a way that no man should. His hat lay tossed on the table, and in his arms rested the smallest, frailest weight he had ever carried, a crying infant girl with a hollow stomach and reddened cheeks. Emma, hush now, little one, John whispered, his voice rough from exhaustion. He rocked her gently, his big hands awkward around the tiny bundle. She rooted against his shirt front, searching for milk he had no way of giving. The bottle sat empty on the table. He had tried feeding her with what little cow's milk he'd managed to warm, but Emma refused it, spitting it back out with weak whimpers. What she needed, what she was desperate for, he could no longer give. Mary, his wife, his strength was gone. Taken by fever just 2 weeks after Emma was born. John had buried her beneath the cottonwood tree out back, the earth still fresh, the grave marked only with a wooden cross he had carved in his grief. Now, each night stretched longer than the last. The silence of the plains pressed against the cabin walls, broken only by the child's cries and John's weary sighs. He was a rancher, not a nursemaid. He knew cattle, not colicky babies. The herd outside grew restless from neglect, fences sagged without repair, but none of it mattered compared to the fragile life in his arms. "I don't know what to do for you, Emma," he muttered, pressing his lips to her downy head. "Your pa's failing you, same as he failed your ma." The words tasted bitter, but they were true. Every attempt to soothe his daughter ended in tears, hers and his. Nights blurred into days, and John felt himself unraveling. He had gone without proper sleep for nearly a week, dozing only when exhaustion knocked him senseless in the chair. Outside, the October wind howled, carrying with it the first hint of winter. Snow would not be far behind. John dreaded it. How was he to keep his baby alive when he could barely keep himself standing? The door creaked on its hinges as the wind shoved against it, and for a fleeting moment, John thought of his wife again, how she used to walk in with her arms full of fresh laundry or herbs from the meadow, humming some gentle tune. He squeezed his eyes shut against the memory, for it cut too deep. Emma's cries grew more desperate, thin and rasping. John rose, bouncing her carefully against his chest, pacing the length of the cabin. He tried humming, but his voice cracked. He tried warming more milk, but she turned her head, refusing again. His frustration mounted until he pressed his forehead against the wall and whispered hoarsely, "Lord, I can't do this alone. If you hear me, send help." The wind answered, rattling the window shutters. He sank into the chair once more, tears burning in his eyes. His strong rancher's hands trembled as he cradled the child, fearing each hour might be her last. And then a sound broke through the storm. Knock, knock. John stiffened. His head snapped toward the door. No one came calling out here, not miles from town, not in weather like this. He thought he'd imagined it, until it came again, firmer this time. Knock, knock. Emma quieted for a moment, as if sensing the change in the air. John rose slowly, shifting her against his chest. His boots scraped the wooden floor as he crossed the door. He opened it to the howl of the wind, and to a woman standing on his porch. Her cloak was drawn tight, dusted with snow. Her face was pale, framed by dark hair pulled back in a braid, and her eyes, steady, searching, met his with something like urgency. "I heard the cries," she said, her voice carrying over the wind. "You got a baby in need." John could only stare, too stunned to answer. The woman stepped closer, her gaze softening as it fell on Emma. "Please, sir, let me help." And for the first time in weeks, John felt a spark of hope flicker in the cold. The stranger at the door. John stood frozen in the doorway, the storm swirling at his back. The woman didn't flinch against the cold. She simply looked at the bundle in his arms, as though the tiny child were all that mattered. Emma whimpered softly, a weak sound that tugged at John's heart. The woman lifted her chin. "She's hungry, isn't she?" John swallowed, his throat dry. "Won't take milk. I don't know what else to do." His voice cracked, the words thick with exhaustion and shame. The stranger's eyes softened. "I do. May I come in?" John hesitated, instinct telling him not to trust strangers on the frontier. But one look at Emma's pale, restless face decided the matter for him. He stepped aside. The woman entered quickly, pushing the door shut against the wind. The cabin grew still again, warmed by the dying fire. She pulled her cloak loose, and John saw she wasn't much older than he was, perhaps mid-20s, with strong features and hands that bore the marks of work. "My name's Clara," she said simply. "Clara Dawson. I've been living with my brother's family, about 5 miles south. I was walking to the spring earlier and heard the crying carrying on the wind. Something told me to follow." John shifted Emma, who had begun fussing again. "You walked 5 miles in this weather?" I couldn't ignore a cry like that. Clara's gaze went to the baby. "May I hold her?" John hesitated, then carefully placed Emma in her arms. The instant the child touched Clara's chest, she quieted, gazing up at the stranger with wide, watery eyes. Clara smiled faintly. "There now. We'll get you strong." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside was a skin pouch of goat's milk, something she had been carrying from her brother's farm. "This might do better than cow's milk," she explained. "Goat milk is gentler on their stomachs." John watched, stunned, as Clara poured a little into the baby's bottle, warmed it near the fire, and pressed it carefully to Emma's lips. For the first time in days, Emma latched and drank hungrily. John sank in his chair, relief washing over him so strongly his eyes stung. "You've done more in 5 minutes than I managed in weeks." Clara looked up at him. "You were trying. That counts for more than you think." For a while, silence filled the cabin, broken only by Emma's contented sucking. John studied the woman in the firelight. She carried herself with quiet confidence, the sort of strength he'd only seen in survivors of hard living. "Your wife, she's gone, isn't she?" Clara asked gently. John's jaw tightened. He nodded once, unable to speak. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "I know what it is to lose family. I wouldn't wish that hollow feeling on anyone." Emma finished her meal and dozed in Clara's arms. John stared at the sight, his chest aching with something he couldn't name, gratitude, sorrow, and a strange warmth he hadn't felt since before Mary's passing. "You should stay the night," John said finally. "Storm will only get worse." Clara hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "You're not." His voice was firm. "Emma, she needs you. And truth be told, so do I." Clara's eyes searched his, as if weighing his sincerity. Then she nodded. "All right, I'll stay." The storm raged through the night. John kept the fire alive, while Clara tended Emma with practiced care. She showed him little things, how to burp the baby properly, how to soothe her when she fussed. Each lesson chipped away at the wall of helplessness John had built around himself. Long after Emma was asleep, John sat across from Clara at the table. The lantern between them cast a warm glow, softening the weariness in his face. "You came knocking on my door like an answer to prayer," he admitted quietly. Clara folded her hands. "Maybe we were both meant to be here tonight. You needed help, and I needed a reason to keep going." "What do you mean?" Her eyes lowered. My brother's wife passed last spring. I've been helping raise their children since. But sometimes I feel like I'm just a burden in their home. No real place of my own. Jean studied her, the weight of her words sinking deep. He recognized that loneliness, different shape, same ache. "You've got a place here," he said before he could stop himself. His voice was steady, certain. "Emma's already taken to you. And I don't know how to do this without you." Clara looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. Then a softness bloomed there, quiet but unmistakable. The fire crackled. The wind howled. And in the middle of it all, something unspoken passed between them. Fragile as a candle flame, yet strong enough to chase back the darkness. For John Carter, the lonely rancher who had thought himself lost, the night no longer felt so empty. Because she had knocked, and maybe, just maybe, she was meant to stay.